Today's episode is with Glenn Frates, and we are covering press releases and news wiring services. Glenn is a VP at Cision, which acquired PR Newswire years ago, and his history was with PR Newswire, so he's really an expert in this area. PR Newswire is one of the premier news wiring services, and in this episode, Glenn will talk a little bit about other news wiring services and the pros and cons of using different vendors. One thing I love about this interview is that while Glenn works for Cision and PR Newswire, he's adamant that news wiring can't be your only strategy for marketing. It can't be your only channel. It's part of an integrated marketing strategy. He's a big fan of a well-written story. He's a big fan of a strong message, and he wants you to have quality CTAs so that people engage with a news release, but then end up back on the company's site, right? So in this episode, Glenn's going to give a lot of tips and tricks for successful releases, everything from the number of characters you should have in your headline to how to add text treatment to CTAs for optimal click-through to even how to use those news releases to engage with journalists. And so there's a ton of information in here. So listen for kind of those details that'll help set you apart. Let's jump in.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. As you may have noticed, I'm not Wendy Covey. I'm Morgan Norris, a senior brand and content strategist, and I'm hosting this Media Miniseries for Wendy to take a deep dive into technical B2B media. From editorial to advertising to trade publications, we're going to figure out when and how to pursue media opportunities to build your brand, gain thought leadership, engage with the technical community, and promote your products and services. I hope you leave each episode of this mini-series ready to take action. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief shout out to our agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information about True, you can visit truemarketing.com. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined by Glenn Frates from Cision, a media organization that helps companies target and engage their audiences. In 2016, Cision acquired PR Newswire, which is a distribution network. We'll talk about that a lot today. And for some of our audience, engaging with media via newswires is a great next step. And for others who already use PR Newswire, a wiring service, I know Cision has a lot to offer. So thanks for being here, Glenn.
Thank you for having me, Morgan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about yourself, your role, what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So I started at before Cision acquired PR Newswire, I started at PRN about 21 years ago.
Okay.
And started off as an assistant editor. And before that, I was a teacher. I worked at grocery stores, all that good stuff when you start your career off. And I've moved up the ranks, and now I'm in charge of US distribution for PR Newswire and PR Web. And I oversee day-to-day operations for the US team, which handles a couple of 100,000 press releases a year.
Yeah.
We'll go with that quote. We handle quite a few messages that we send out daily on behalf of every type of brand and organization, from nonprofits to NGOs to the largest brands in the world, from Google, Facebook, and Microsoft.
Great. Okay, so over the last 21 years since you started at PR Newswire, talk to me about how newswires have kind of changed and evolved over the last 20 years. So I know for me, when I started my career, we at times were still faxing releases and things like that, which is less necessary now. But talk to me just a little bit about maybe if people kind of entered their careers early on or had some experience early on in their career with a newswire in the early aughts, how has that changed over time?
It's changed pretty considerably. You know, when I started off, yes, fax on demand was a huge service. And the wire was very much in its infancy, just even though it started 60 years ago. It hadn't changed a whole lot going back to 20 years ago, in that we were still sending out copy in plain ASCII typewriter text.
Yeah.
There was no great features involved with the copy. Multimedia was barely used, and it was a separate wire. So you'd send the text over one wire, multimedia over another. And then starting about 15 years ago, we started making huge progress in terms of, we now send out the copy in beautiful HTML, so we can feature bolding and bullets and everything you can do to a Word document. And then another huge improvement has been how we transmit multimedia, photos and video. We work constantly with our downstream partners from Bloomberg and the Associated Press on downwards. And working with them, we're able to give them in the same feed, the multimedia, so we can embed the photos and videos in that feed.
Okay.
So those are the two biggest changes, I would say.
Yep, that's a huge change. I remember having to kind of multimedia was a separate, you kind of went to the separate spot to get that. So
Yes.
okay, good. So talk to me about companies. So we're working with a lot of engineering and technical B2B technical companies. So tell me from your perspective, kind of when and why should somebody use the Newswire to disseminate information?
Sure. So the Newswire is great for three things, I like to say. One, it's fantastic to hit local media. We target local media really well. So the Newswire was based on originally state and local regional distributions and still is. So if you want to hit just New York Metro or just Los Angeles Metro, or as small as if you want to hit just, not to call out anybody in terms of saying small, but we could hit like South Dakota. It's actually the Dakotas. So hitting local media is a great way to use and take advantage of using a wire like Cision. The second is making sure, our online network, our syndication network is second to none. So in terms of really reaching a much broader audience than you would with your own social channels, that is definitely something to utilize the wire for. We will hit in the US alone up to 5,000 different online websites and portals. So that's the second big advantage. And then the third, I would say, is related to our syndication network is future discoverability. So I always like to tell people, once you post something on prnewswire.com, it's there forever unless 10 years later you tell us to take it down. But it's a really good, we take to heart, making sure our site's SEO is up to date and matching any updates that Google and their algorithms are churning out quarter to quarter. So when you do if you have good keywords in the headline and in the lead, when somebody does an organic search a year later related to that release and related to those keywords, there's a good chance that press release is going to show up. So future discoverability, I think, is the third big reason to use a Newswire.
I think that that's a huge piece that people don't realize is the SEO portion of it, because when we've got clients, and I think for us often kind of a realistic cadence is like a quarterly news release, about, and we'll go through kind of what campaigns they're working on or what topics and pick the topic and write that news release. But then over time, one news release, one of anything is never going to change the world. But, over time, when you've got those on there, and then all of a sudden now you search for that company name, or you search, like you said, for the term, and you've got all of these, even third-party results postings on PR Newswire or on other outlets that are getting your message across in kind of a third-party format. And so I'm a huge advocate of that. And I think people need to kind of take the time and set aside the resources to do that consistently. So that's great.
Well, and to follow up, that is probably one of the top three key things. One, you have to write a good story, right? But two is to have a consistent editorial calendar. If it's going to be quarterly, so be it, but make sure you're always pushing out a good message at a consistent rate. We have some clients who will do 5 releases in a month and then go dark for 6 months. That's not the greatest approach in terms of marketing and PR.
Yep. Good. So you're hearing it from Glenn. Consistent news releases. Let's make a plan and then we'll follow that plan. I think that's awesome. So tell me about, okay, so you convinced me I'm going to wire some news. How do I prepare that news? What makes a good news release? Tell me about that.
So there's a few things. So I talked to clients a lot about this. I had 2 client calls yesterday about this in particular. So there's probably about 3 or 4 different things to take into consideration when you're uploading and sending, or when you're crafting the press release and then you're uploading it and sending it to the wire.
Yeah.
Some of the basics, like the real basics, Word format, Word document is preferable. We'll be able to match whatever Word features. So again, bullets,
Yep.
hyperlinking, embedding links. We're going to be able to match that in whatever we send over the wire. But in terms of then what goes into the press release, the top two things I would say are, one, you have to really take the time to write a good headline.
Mhm.
It is what it is. When the release goes over the wire, most recipients, most network partners of ours pick up, they have headline cues. So it's all about, you might have a great story in that body, but if you didn't get somebody to click on that headline, and it's very similar to, whether it's a LinkedIn post or a tweet, you want to make sure you capture them really well. And it has to be, and this is the tough part, you have to have that key message within about the first 70 characters.
Okay.
And that's tough. I get it. It'll take sometimes, I tell clients, be prepared to rewrite your release 10 times. Ask your partner about it, ask your child about it, read it out loud. You want to put a lot of effort into that headline. And then the second thing that is painfully underutilized is a call to action link. So you have a great story and you're going to have a great lead. You're going to have decently shorter paragraphs, right? You don't want to lose anybody in a long paragraph. And then what I call above the fold, so the old newspaper lingo in terms of, so before somebody has to start scrolling on the web page, you have to have, what's the reason why you put out this message? You want them to continue that engagement with your brand, right? Even if it's a little bit more of a boring personnel announcement or even like acquisition announcements, which we send dozens daily, those are sort of boring, right?
Right.
You still have to have some good call to action where the person will, your audience, no matter who they are, B2C, B2B, investors, or even if it's a release that was an update on internal, we do a lot of releases for brands like Target, for example, who will give updates on just what they're doing internally with their employees. You want to have a good link that person sees, again, above the fold, stands out really nice. I tell clients all the time, you should bold it and have it as like a standalone paragraph. For more information, a good one I like is like ESG reports. Have that be a standalone and say, to read the full report, click here.
Okay,
And
so don't even bury, don't wait till the end, because the
No,
end feels like a natural place, but we want it
it
above
is,
the
and that
fold.
is the
Okay,
tradition, is to put the
I
link at
love
the
that.
bottom. Yeah, you definitely want to keep it above, and it shouldn't be, so that's another good point. It should be a deep link, right? It should be something that's relevant and new.
Yeah.
Don't just have it be the top domain URL, because that's boring. That's saved for the boilerplate in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so helpful. I love too, one thing about whenever you submit a release to PR Newswire, you guys go through to Cision, you guys go through and actually run through that and make sure there aren't like glaring errors, make sure the links work and things like that too. So knowing that, one thing I learned, I think early on in my career, was you need to link to something and and that link needs to be live. A lot of times we would, say, oh, well, that link's going to go live tomorrow. And your team would say, no, you need to go ahead and make that live now, because we're not going to send it out with a bunch of broken links in it. So make sure your links are live and ready to go in there. Okay, that's awesome.
And I'll throw in one more thing for your audience, a thing that, again, that's a little bit not, especially for folks that are more small business, mid-market, you want to make sure you have a good media contact.
Okay.
And that contact is available for at least 5 days after you send out the PR.
Great. Okay.
That's very important too, is to have, that good headline, the good call to action. In general, a good story, you want to take the time to write a good story. And then having a good media contact, because that's really important, right? If somebody tries to reach out, whether it's via email or phone, and don't get back to that journalist for a half a day, you've missed the chance possibly of getting good earned media.
Yep. Okay, that's great. So I think that for sure, having somebody that's going to be there, can answer the phone, can answer the email right when it comes through, and it's kind of anticipating that might happen too. So you got to be watching for that. Yep, that's great. Okay, so talk to me about I get emails all the time. We are loyal PR Newswire customers, Cision customers. We love the product in general, but I get emails all the time from these small newswires that say, oh, for $50, you can wire your release with us. Talk to me about why we should use a large scale wire. And you're not the only one, there's multiple wires in the country, but why should we use these large scale ones? Why is it worth the cost when there's all these kind of other smaller companies out there?
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, there's three of us. I won't name the other two here, but there's definitely a difference in what I would call like premium wire services and then lower end wire services.
Yes.
And Cision takes pride in being the number one wire service in the US and globally. And for a few different reasons, we have all sorts of benchmarks and data points to back that up, obviously. But the reasons why you would go with a premium wire service is probably two main reasons. Three I'll go with. One is network reach. It doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
You know, that small end wire is gonna tout that they can hit Yahoo Finance. And that sort of stops there, right? Whereas Cision and the premium wire services are able to hit such a broader audience.
Yeah.
And it's all targeted, right? We have, my favorite example is we have sites that subscribe. So we tag every release with up to 200 different codes. And we have sites that subscribe just to our nanotechnology feed, for example. It's always my favorite. It's just
so specific.
Yes. And so that is the number one selling point, I think. Number two is, honestly, it's credibility and trust. We have relationships going back 60 years with the largest media services in the world that those small end wire services just don't have. And I'm not gonna, whether they have the ones that I'm about to name or not, maybe they do, but most likely they don't. AP, Dow Jones, and Reuters lead the way, obviously. And those smaller services don't hit those media points for the most part. And then number three is in regards to, I would say, so it's credibility and trust, it's network reach, and then network partnership, which is related to that trust. And you know, we have a team of 5 full-time employees that is constantly working with our network partners and making updates to the feed and making sure, you know, we take client feedback very sincerely. And if you say, geez, I wish it looked like this on this particular website, we'll reach out to that website and try to update and upgrade that feed they receive.
Okay, good.
So that's really important too. Yeah.
That service aspect. And I will say too, just there have been times where we've used those kind of not premium services. And I think what we were talking about with news releases, kind of building SEO and things like that, you just don't get with those smaller wire services. You'll see the news release come up in SEO for a week, maybe 30 days, and then it just like goes away almost as if it never happened. And so you don't get that longevity of it that I think is so important. And I love that you mentioned too, just the kind of back end coding and tagging of releases that you guys do, because a lot of our audience is so niched, focused on specific aerospace electronics or defense or test and measurement for the automotive industry. And so because you guys can go that granular, I think that that's so helpful for these technology companies.
Yeah, no, for sure. And honestly, if anybody, you could always reach out to us and we can talk about, we can go into more detail about our services and how we target releases. And you could see, just going to prnewswire.com, you can see the biggest brands in the world, and you can see the targeting that we provided at the bottom of every press release, actually. So you can go look up a release from Raytheon or Boeing or Jacobs. I'm trying to think of companies that your audience might be interested in. And you can see how it's targeted and how when we shoot it out, that is always a question. Do you just shoot out the press release and it hits everybody at the same time? And that's not the case at all. We definitely target as much as we can. And we work constantly in updating that with our partners.
That 100%, I feel like underscores all the things that we say, right? We want to target the right people with the right message. We don't need to just scream it out to everybody and it just falls on deaf ears across the board. So
Yeah,
I love
for sure.
that. Okay, so tell me about, I've got a story, I wrote a news release. What else can I do? You guys have many products, but
Yeah.
everything from kind of add-ons to news releases, or how and when do we strategically use those? Thinking about the fact that we're talking here to a lot of engineers and marketers who are a little bit newer to marketing, maybe,
Sure.
or newer to marketing spend too. I can't pitch a $15,000 news release to somebody realistically, but if somebody's got $1,500, what do they do with that? How do you optimize that?
So there's a few things. One, as much as I'll talk up Cision and all of our services, Cision is part of a broader campaign, right? So you have to have good, a lot of accompanying action moments, action points. One is, making sure you're utilizing your own channels. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you should have them all. You never know where you're going to capture an audience, right?
Yep.
Some people only want to look at Instagram. Make sure you have a good website, a deep website that has good supplemental messaging related to your release. So again, that would be where you do the good call to action link.
Yeah, we need to send them somewhere quality.
Yes. And then when you send a release over the wire, I would say in terms of how to, utilizing Cision services, we are a full service messaging service, if you will, in that we offer a great database service. So fantastic. Hundreds of thousands of journalists and influencers in a product that I generally just call our database product.
Right.
That is utilized for before you send out the release. If you want to target journalists specifically, that is your go-to, right? I tell people all the time, yes, using the wire, it's fantastic. We can target, we hit a broad audience, we hit local media. We have a great partnership with the AP, which is, everybody knows is fantastic. But you should do your legwork in reaching out to 5 or 6 journalists that cover your beat, right? They're the ones who you send the release to as an embargo, before the release actually is supposed to be, officially announced on the wire. They're the ones who you send a teaser to, and it's always via email. Utilizing our database service gives you access to those journalists. It gives
that
you
is excellent. So we talked in this series also, we talked to a couple of editors of trade publications, and one of them was just very passionate about, he was like, don't just send me a release. I'm going to see the release. I look at the wire. I'm going to see it. I want you to send me a little, tidbit that kind of is going to be privy to my own readers. And so I need you to add some color and context around that. So yes, so using different channels, same message. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I like to call it like repurposing good content, right? So for your social channels, you'll have a great image that you could repurpose and embed in the wire release. And then when you reach out to individual journalists, whether you're utilizing our database or not, hopefully you are, that is, I like to say it's like a teaser. And you have to be prepared too, to give them potentially, especially if somebody you want, a good pub, a trade pub that you want good pickup from, you want to give them a unique executive quote, for example, that might differ a little bit than what's in the press release. You want to work with them one-on-one, knowing that they want, and you want to give them everything you can up front to make, I like to always say, make their life easier. So make sure you have good quotes. Why does this news matter to them and their end audience? Have good multimedia or potential multimedia that you can provide them, because I'll get on my soapbox and stay on there all day. Every downstream partner of ours, from Associated Press on down, attaches some image to that story they pick up. So it's always best, I like to say a few times here, you want to control the narrative as much as possible. So give them the image you want them to pick up.
Great. Okay, perfect. I love that. I think that is so helpful. The media database is a great resource. And then just being able to use the Newswire as another channel to get that message out is excellent. So Well, that's awesome. With that, I hope people, listen to this, and if they've never wired a release before, or it's something that they're interested in doing, what's the best way to get in contact with you guys? So they have news, they have their news release, they're ready to go. They email PR Newswire. I think there's a contact.
There is, if you go to
what's the easiest way? Mm-hmm.
If you go to prnewswire.com, you can click send a release, and then it'll ask you, do you want to sign in or do you want to become a new member?
Perfect.
And it's a one-page new member form. It's very easy. We just ask for the basics. And then that goes into a queue, and you'll get a phone call within the next hour to talk about our services, talk about what you need, what your budget is. We definitely can tailor whatever you need, and whatever budget you have, we can make it work.
Yep.
So that it's pretty straightforward if you just go through the prnewswire.com portal.
Awesome. Excellent. And we, just for us on our end, how that typically works is we're PR Newswire members, and then we're able to wire release on behalf of our clients, and kind of choose the right packages based on goals and stuff with your team. So, and I will say the PR Newswire team is so responsive. I think if clients come to us and say, oh, we have a, trade show tomorrow and we're going to make this announcement, what should we do? What can we do? It's so easy and streamlined. I can get an answer back to them so quickly because your team is on it. Somebody picks up the phone or somebody emails you within like 5 minutes. It's nuts.
Yeah, no,
I won't promise that on your behalf, but it's very fast.
We are there 24/7. Even on, I always joke, like Christmas night at 2 a.m. I still have 2 full-time editors working the desk. So we're always there to help out however we can.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is wonderful. I think the information is fantastic. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to any resources we talked about, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While you're there, you can subscribe to our blog and newsletter. And we've also got a book that Wendy authored called Content Marketing Engineered. It's about building and executing an end-to-end content marketing plan. I would also love your reviews on this podcast. So when you get a chance, subscribe, rate, and review Content Marketing Engineered on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks again. Have a great day.